To work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News. It is 7 o'clock. Good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has rejected suggestions Brexit is responsible for delays at the port of Dover. That's despite some passengers saying they had to queue for up to 16 hours to have their passports checked. Holidaymakers trying to get away for Easter are still facing delays of up to 8 hours, despite extra services being put on overnight. Port officials have blamed delays on a lengthy immigration process. Ms Braverman, meanwhile, has singled out British Pakistani men over concerns about grooming gangs as she prepares to announce new measures to tackle child sexual abuse. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, the Home Secretary says authorities have turned a blind eye to signs of abuse over fears of being labelled racist or bigoted. She's blaming political correctness. Safeguarding Minister Sarah Dines says it's a scourge of our society.
We can't stop in making sure that people are protected. Children are the most vulnerable part of our society, as well as the elderly. We must make sure that they're not sexually abused. So I don't accept we're going to be rife with false reports. There may be 1 or 2, and they will be dealt with and identified. The overwhelming people that gave evidence are speaking the truth to the inquiry, and it was very heartbreaking testimony. We need to act.
The families of 2 of the 3 British men being detained in Afghanistan say they're being treated fairly after what they've described as an unscripted emotional call. A spokesman for 2 of the men, Kevin Cornwell and one who is unnamed, says it represents tremendous progress. They have been in custody since January. It is unclear how long the 3rd man, the so-called danger tourist Miles Routledge, has been held. The government says it's in negotiations regarding their safety. At least 1 person's been killed and 16 others injured in an explosion at a cafe in St. Petersburg. The prominent pro-Russian military blogger Vladlen Tatarsky is confirmed to have died. Now, he is a vocal supporter of Russia's war in Ukraine. A local news website in St. Petersburg reported the cafe targeted was once owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Russia's Wagner Group, a notorious private army of mercenaries fighting in Ukraine. No one has yet claimed responsibility. The United States is urging Russia to immediately release a journalist who's been detained on suspicion of spying. Evan Gershkovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, pleaded not guilty earlier this week. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told Russia's top diplomat it's unacceptable. In response, Sergei Lavrov has accused Washington of trying to politicise the case. He could be facing up to 20 years in prison. The Pope's led a Palm Sunday service in Rome a day after being sent home from hospital with bronchitis. Around 30,000 people came to watch Pope Francis opening Easter celebrations, which mark the start of Holy Week. The Pope was taken to hospital on Wednesday for breathing difficulties, but returned home to the Vatican, having made a swift recovery. He returned home yesterday. TV online, DAB, plus radio, and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's time for Free Speech Nation.
Donald Trump is indicted on criminal charges. Suella Braverman insists that Rwanda is safe for migrants. And a YouTuber is harassed as he tries to film a supposedly peaceful protest. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at current affairs, politics, culture, and we're going to be keeping you updated on the latest escapades of our close friends, the Culture Warriors. Who or what will they cancel next? The anticipation is killing me. Coming up on the show tonight, women's rights activist Kelly J. Keane will be here to tell us about the frightening experience she had in New Zealand as she was hounded by an angry mob. Author and educator Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert will tell us about the latest campaign by Don't Divide Us, which poses the question, when does education turn into indoctrination? And we're also going to be talking to a YouTuber who accidentally happened upon an apparently peaceful protest and found himself accosted and harassed while the police appeared to do nothing at all. And, of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from the lovely studio audience, all that and much, much more. But first, I'd like to introduce my studio guests this evening are the comedians Cressida Wetton and Francis Foster. You've got a show coming up in Brighton, is that right?
Yes, work in progress, Andrew. Work in progress.
So you don't want people to go?
Well, you can come, but don't, lower your expectations.
OK, so, it won't be very
Fringe.
good. And it means that they can't complain if it's no good.
Exactly,
and they can't get their money
it's
back.
almost as I planned it.
Yeah, perfect. Francis, how are you?
I'm very well, Andrew. How are you?
I'm all right. Well, I've just come back from Capri, so I've had...
I don't want to hear any more.
You know what?
No.
I'm entitled to a holiday from...
No, you're not entitled to rub your happiness in my face. Sorry, mate.
Well, OK, we're going to get some questions from the audience now. Our first question is from Danny. Hello, Danny. What's your question?
Hello, my question is Donald Trump going to jail?
This is exciting, isn't it? So, Donald Trump, you must have read this. He's been indicted by a Manhattan grand jury on criminal charges relating to this alleged hush money payments that he made to Stormy Daniels, adult film star.
Yes.
So I'll come to you as an expert in that area, Francis.
Thank you very much. I am an expert in politics. You're right, Andrew.
That's exactly what I meant. I'm not familiar with her work, but what do you...
Wrong demographic, Andrew.
Almost certainly. So what... Is this... What's going on here? What do you think?
So what is going on? So Trump is alleged to have had sexual relations, to quote one former US president, with Stormy Daniels. But that isn't the problem. It isn't the problem that he paid her allegedly $130,000 in hush money. What is a problem is that Trump did the most Trump-like thing possible and listed it as a business expense.
Yeah. No, that's going to be key, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah.
Because if it is the case that he privately paid her to keep her quiet, that's a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
That's not going to go anywhere. So they must be confident that this is a felony and that they can escalate it to a felony, connect it to the campaign. And that's what it looks like.
To me, this is a completely ridiculous move on their part, because what they've done is they've actually made Trump look like the victim here.
Yeah.
Because we all know this is political. We know they wouldn't do this for any other president apart from him. So now he can go, look, it's the deep state, they're against me, and as a result of that, they're trying to silence and stop me, which is going to reactivate his base.
That's what he's been saying all along.
So he's right.
So this is the problem, Cressida, isn't it? The Manhattan DA seems to think that this is a sensible thing to do. But as we've already seen, Trump's popularity is going up. This is going to play to his base hugely. Is it possible that the Democrats are doing this deliberately because they want Trump to run? I mean, I'm seriously considering this now.
I guess so. I mean, we were talking about this earlier and saying, is this like another 2016 where they think this can't possibly work? And actually it might. Like, look at the polls, guys.
Yeah.
It's,
what I don't understand is that the DA of Manhattan has been on this big thing saying he wants to be soft on crime. You know, he doesn't want to prosecute people for committing certain crimes. He wants to call them misdemeanors rather than felonies. I was in New York recently, and I went to buy some shampoo, and it was all locked behind glass doors. You have to ask for it, because what happens in New York shops is if someone comes in and just empties the shelves, if it's below $1,000, they don't get charged, they don't get prosecuted, they don't get arrested. Which means that people just come in with carts and just sort of like supermarket sweep it, right? And this is
Is Dale Winton there as well, Andrew?
Dale Winton, well, he should be there.
Why are they doing it with shampoo? Like, go for the expensive stuff.
But they're doing it with absolutely everything. So in other words, you have to ask permission to get, which can be embarrassing depending on the items you're buying. But the thing about that, not personal experience, but the thing about that, Francis, is New York, this whole soft on crime thing that the DA wants to do, effectively giving a veto to criminals to do whatever they want. But and he's saying that he shouldn't prosecute absolutely everything, but he will prosecute this, a misdemeanor that is well beyond its statute of limitations. It's, like you say, got to be political, surely.
It's absolutely 100% political. And what they're doing is giving Donald Trump exactly what he wants, which is the oxygen of publicity.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to backfire hugely. And also, once you open this floodgate, I mean, this idea of, like, prosecuting political opponents, Trump calls it weaponizing the judiciary. It's difficult to argue with him on that. This is a bad move. You know, if I were a Democrat, I'd be angry about this. I think this would be bad for them. Anyway, let's get another question now. This is from Catherine. Where's Catherine?
Right here.
Hello.
Hello. Are biblical paintings offensive?
Well, this is very interesting, because this story is about Oxford counsellors who have announced they're thinking of selling off their collection of classical and biblical paintings, which they say are inappropriate. Some examples include this painting of Salome, you know, that famous painting where she's got the head of John the Baptist on a plate, which is quite disturbing. I saw that in the Uffizi in Florence. It was an upsetting thing. But what, you know, Francis, I mean, what's going on here?
Well, what's going on here is people who are losing their minds.
Yeah.
Let's be fair. Nobody has ever been offended by a painting of John the Baptist. Many people have been bored by it because they don't want to look at it, and they've been dragged there by their partners to go and see a painting, but nobody has ever sat there and thought, do you know what, this is really offensive to me and all the other victims of beheading around the world.
Well, they're specifically talking about, the examples they give, Oxford Council, are animal cruelty.
Yes.
Gender-based violence. Do you have an image of any of the paintings? Because I think we might, if we could get an image up, we could see the kind of thing. There's one image, for instance, of... okay, that's a good example. So that's the rape of the Sabines. But that's the foundation of Rome. I mean, Rome was founded on sexual assault. It was them...
Of course, they're Italians.
Goodness me. But the painting itself, Cressida, did that painting offend you, speaking as a woman?
Absolutely not, as a woman. So everybody listen. No, it didn't offend me at all. I mean, what's the purpose of a museum? Are we... What's the aim? Aren't we charting the past and put a plaque on it if you don't like it?
Well, I worry about this because last week we discussed this other story. There was some teachers in America saying, well, someone's been sacked actually at a school for showing an image of Michelangelo's David because of the nudity, and they said
pornographic.
They said it was pornographic.
I mean, yeah. Anybody find it attractive? Bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, and it's the same old question, isn't it? All this stuff. Who's making the decisions? You know.
Yeah. No, like Francis says, no one's really offended about any of this stuff. It's just people sort of.
Not.
But what I worry about with this is the fact that they go after art. Again and again, like the target always seems to be art and creativity, and they want to sort of weirdly sanitise it and just make sure that if you get rid of all potential for offence in any form of artwork, then you don't have art anymore, basically.
And you don't have art,
Absolutely.
and you don't have culture, and as we all know, everything is downstream of culture.
Right.
So if you sanitise art forms, then what people see is no representation of transgressive ideas or ideas that could challenge us. And as a result, the powers that be think the populace is therefore not going to have transgressive ideas. Yeah. But they don't know. We've got WhatsApp, mate.
There is that. But also, I mean, like, being offended, Cressida, can be quite fun. Like, I like watching a film or reading a book where I'm shocked every now and then.
Absolutely. I mean, what kind of art would you want if it wasn't... Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of horror films. Should they just stop?
Great example, yeah.
Exactly.
Because you get to play it out in avatars rather than actually doing it in the real world, don't you? We get to play with what humanity's capable of and what we're thinking, what our darkest thoughts are. Yeah. But it's all on a canvas, so that's a good place to do it.
Yeah, you know, when I first saw Leprechaun 2, you know, I had nightmares about this small little creature that kills people with a pogo stick.
Well, there you go.
But I was exhilarated.
Really?
Yeah, it's better than the first one. The first one...
You're inoculating yourself against real life, aren't you?
Yeah,
like, heaven
exactly.
forbid that we shouldn't do that.
Exactly, but is that prejudice against little people?
And it's all going to get sold off on the black market to goodness knows who, you know. So who are the people that want to buy it if it's so dark?
Oxford councillors need to keep hold of their paintings. We're going to get a question now from Pete. Where is Pete? Hi, Pete.
Is a bit of really funny comedy now a thing of the past on the oh-so-woke BBC?
So, yeah, this is an interesting one. So they're saying now that Have I Got News for You could be the only topical satirical comedy left on the BBC because they're now planning to cancel Ramesh Ranganation's show. What's it called? The Ranganation.
The Ranganation.
Yeah, and they're going to cancel that as well. So they're going to be left with Have I Got News for You? And I think Mock the Week got dropped as well.
It did indeed. So did Frankie Boyle's New World Order.
So Frankie Boyle's gone. So you've basically got Ramesh's show and Have I Got News for You, and that's it. What's happening to the BBC? Wasn't it always the place where comedy could thrive and sort of develop?
It was always a place that comedy could thrive and develop, but we know, you know, and I do, and Crest knows that comedy is a monoculture where only one particular set of values and ideas are celebrated and one particular opinion is celebrated.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having left-wing comedy. The problem is, if it's only one type of comedy, there's only going to be one type of attack. And where the laughter comes in comedy is the unpredictableness of it.
Right.
And as a result, if the audience can predict every time that what the punchline is going to be, it's no longer funny.
Would it be more interesting if the BBC sort of allowed more targets? I mean, to be fair, so for instance, on the MASH report, they did have Jeff Norcott on that show to give a kind of different perspective because he's a Conservative voter, but that's about it.
The right-wing comedian of the UK.
The only right-wing comedian.
Yeah.
Are the BBC just getting this wrong, do you think?
Well, I guess they are, because people are voting with their feet, aren't they? I mean, that's exactly it. If they're not enjoying it, then the figures are going to start to go down, and that's what's happening. So,
yeah, it's interesting. OK, well, we'll get we've got time for one more question in this section. This is from Ryan. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, good evening. Is it safe to send migrants to Rwanda?
Well, I've never been, but the Home Secretary thinks it's absolutely fine, and she's been criticised because obviously there's this ongoing furore about whether we should be sending migrants to Rwanda. Suella Braverman was confronted with evidence on the BBC about 12 Congolese refugees who had been shot and killed by police in Rwanda. That was in 2018. But she said she didn't know about this case. She said that, you know, that this in itself does not suggest that it is an unsafe... I mean, I suppose bad things can happen everywhere. That sounds particularly bad, though, especially coming from the police.
It does, and it was about food rations, which is pretty dark. But she made the point that this was 5 years ago, and she was kind of implying, look, guys, we've cleaned up our act, you know.
Yeah.
She wasn't in charge then, so...
It's interesting with Rwanda, isn't it? Because, of course, so many have those memories of the horrific, the genocide, and that it does crop up whenever you think about this country. Of course, things have changed hugely, and the argument of the Rwanda government is, look, this is a great place to live, and actually, you know, they want this to go through. Do you think Suella Braverman's in a difficult position here?
I think she's in a very, very difficult position because the reality is we've lost the ability to have a sane and measured conversation about immigration, and particularly illegal immigration, because there are certain parts of people on the far left who equate borders with racism. And once you have that idea in your mind, then any type of conversation about a subject, which has always been a hot-button issue, has become utterly impossible.
Yeah.
I find it actually very interesting that the past two Home Secretaries have been women of colour, shall we just put it like that? Because just imagine a man who looks and sounds like me going, right, protect our borders. It's not going to sound good, is it?
No, but you say that, but Priti Patel and Suella Braverman have been attacked and called racist themselves. It hasn't protected them, has it? You know,
No.
in fact, they've had racial slurs thrown their way for not being the right kind of person of colour.
Right, yeah, which we won't repeat here.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, that's horrendous, isn't it? Because then you can't do right for doing wrong, and I don't know...
So why is it the case that when it comes to the immigration debate, it's always interpreted as immediately racist if you say, well, maybe a sensible policy?
Well, I think, yeah, borders are racism. I think that's...
It's bizarre,
There's
isn't
just this stopping point where you're not allowed to have a proper conversation about it.
Yeah, and it's important, I mean, not least for the migrants who are being trafficked and could potentially lose their lives on the crossing.
And this is the thing as well, is that we never have a nuanced conversation anymore because all either side is interested in is actually winning. But the reality is, you know, there's people smugglers on the other side of the channel who are making a lot of money out of this.
Yeah.
And people are losing their lives in the channel. So it needs to be sorted, and it needs to be sorted quickly.
Absolutely. And dare I say it, if you show that it's not going to work, it might reduce the people coming, which sounds brutal, but long term, that's...
OK,
Racist.
well, thank you, Francis. Right, well, look, coming up on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the women's rights activist Kellie-Jay Keane about the frightening ordeal she endured in New Zealand on her Let Women Speak tour. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway. Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my common sense crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
To Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Women's rights activist Kellie-Jay Keane, also known as Posy Parker, hit the headlines last week when the New Zealand leg of her Let Women Speak tour was disrupted by trans activists. Kellie-Jay had to be escorted away from an event in Auckland by the police amidst genuinely disturbing scenes as she was confronted by a baying mob who heckled her, threw tomato juice at her and could potentially have even trampled her to death. A subsequent event in Wellington had to be cancelled. And Kellie-Jay ended up leaving the country, so she now joins me here tonight. Good evening, Kellie-Jay. Thanks for coming onto the show. Can I ask you first and foremost, how are you? It's been a week, obviously, since these rather terrifying events. How are you feeling now?
I'm great. My husband whisked us away on a family holiday, so I'm good. I think it was scary and devastating, and I went into police protection, but I think we managed to peak the world.
Important point, and perhaps you could talk us through what is behind the Let Women Speak event. What is it that you're trying to achieve from visiting these places?
Well, it's a little bit like Cuprinol. It's exactly what it says on the tin. So it's simply about creating space where women can speak about the attacks and infringements on their rights posed by transgender ideology. So that might be their children having their bodies sterilised, or getting sucked into this cult, or losing language, or not being able to speak about this at work or family and friends. And they simply come to this space that we've created in order for them to speak.
I saw some of the footage of when you approached the gathering in Auckland, and one of the things that you were saying to the camera at the time was there are no police here. Did it at any point occur to you, well, maybe I shouldn't go into this space because there's just no protection here?
Well, you'd think, wouldn't you? I assumed that once I got through the first bit of crowd, that in the centre there would be police offering a buffer between women coming to speak, and some men, but predominantly women coming to speak, and the protesters that were there to try and stop us speaking by drowning us out and intimidating us. And I was really shocked when I got in the centre that there were no police.
To what extent do you think that the lack of police presence is an indication of a failure at the highest levels of authority? I mean, we had politicians and media commentators calling you far right, even implying that you had fascist sympathies. Has that caused this problem, do you think?
Oh, yes, but this has been going on a really long time. And Nazi is the latest in many slurs thrown at women to try and stop us speaking. So, you know, it's sad and devastating and dishonest that they keep doing it, but I sort of feel that we're getting to this crescendo of what more can they say about women who just want to say women don't have penises and we'd like men to stay out of our spaces. And I guess this eventually will have no impact on regular people who are looking at this issue. And actually, the way the New Zealand government treated me and immigration treated me, and they shone a real bright light on me. Other people looked into me and found that actually I wasn't the things that I was being accused of, and I had something valuable to say.
So let's address what a lot of your critics say, which is that at the event preceding Auckland in Melbourne, there were a small group of neo-Nazis doing Nazi salutes. And what they've tried to say is that you were in some way complicit with these people. What do you say to that?
Well, it's absolutely ludicrous, but utterly convenient. However, those men turned up to do their own rally. It was nothing to do with mine. They've got just as much as the Antifa, far left or authoritarian fascists that turn up, which they might call themselves trans rights activists, but they had just as much to do with them as they did with anyone else, which was pretty much nothing. I mean, I don't know much about Nazi ideology, but I don't recall some sort of women's rights arm of far-right Nazi ideology. So they had nothing to do with us whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, no, they would be veering quite far from the ideology there. You mentioned that this event has piqued a lot of people. I have to say, I think you're right. There's so many people have been talking about this event, but it's those images of these men breaking through barriers in this violent way and surrounding you. And what do you think is going through their heads? Because surely they're trying to persuade people that they should be in your spaces, and then they're behaving like this. What on earth's going on?
Oh, come on, Andrew. After seeing that, everyone's on their side. Everyone's going, what, that tiny, threatening, bigoted woman, dangerous woman. Of course we want more men in her space. You know, what a great, massive failure on their behalf. I often invite these nasty, aggressive misogynists. I sort of, you know, I playfully say, you know, come and prove my point, and they do. And this time, 2,000 of them did, and it was rather frightening. And a 72-year-old woman got a fractured skull, and another woman got her foot broken, and the violence was just horrendous. But it's made so much worse by the fact that news in New Zealand and politicians have pretended that this was some peaceful, loving protest to show what a Be Kind Rainbow Brigade New Zealand actually has. So that in itself has also helped people understand that the news and the media is sometimes not on the side of the people.
I think that's right. I mean, I saw that footage of the 72-year-old woman punched repeatedly in the head, and yet you've had Media Watch, a New Zealand outlet, today saying that it was totally peaceful and this has been completely misrepresented. I mean, people can see for themselves, can't they? And I suppose the more you do this, the more that will become absolutely clear. But why do you think it is that the violence is escalating? Because I think that is the case all over the world. The violence seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, I think violence seems to be getting worse. Full stop. Not just in this issue, but they're just about to lose. And so I think these are the final throes of a really aggressive ideology that most women have known for a long time, and I'm sure men are catching up, but most women have known for a long time that it's underpinned by misogyny and a real hatred of women. And so this is the final frontier, isn't it? We've been ignored, we've been laughed at, now they're going to fight us. And then, as Gandhi says, we will win.
And what next for you? Will you be continuing the tour? Will you be doing anything else to try and raise awareness of this?
Yeah, 1 o'clock next Sunday, I'll be back at Speaker's Corner for the regular Let Women Speak event. Then I'm going to Birmingham, going to Ireland. Then we'll go back to Speaker's Corner. Then we're going to Birmingham. And in amongst that, I'm going to start my campaign to run against Keir Starmer to force serious politicians that are gutless to actually talk about this issue and not hide from it anymore. And they'll have to tell the electorate, do they know what a woman is or not? And they either look foolish or they will be roundly peak trans themselves.
Yeah, well, good luck with that, because they have a serious problem answering that question, don't they? Kelly J. Keane, thank you ever so much for joining me tonight. And next on Free Speech Nation, author Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert will be here to tell us about the latest investigation by campaign group Don't Divide Us. It would seem that when it comes to issues of race and identity, many schools are more interested in indoctrination than education. So stay right there.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Thanks for joining us here at Free Speech Nation. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Cressida Wetton and Francis Foster. We're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any problems, whatever they might be, just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our best to answer your problems. Moving on, the campaign group Don't Divide Us produced a report last year which found that 1 in 4 councils were promoting contentious diversity policies. The report also found that 89% of these councils were using third-party providers, including commercial companies and charities. A forthcoming report from Don't Divide Us will look more closely at these third-party providers and what issues they're promoting. And author Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert from Don't Divide Us joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Alka, I think firstly we should talk a little bit about Don't Divide Us. What is it that you are seeking to do?
Well, we are seeking to oppose ideas that are being promoted in our institutions under the name of anti-racism. But actually, when you look at what they're doing, they're actually re-racialising, you know, in situations where people are getting along fine, where at a point historically where Britain, you know, in Britain, race has never been less of a factor in, you know, how well you can do in terms of living your life freely. At that exact point, we have this ideology come in that says that is really wanting to ensure that we see race first and foremost, you know.
It's very interesting because a lot of teacher friends of mine, I mean, you do a lot of work with schools, and a lot of teachers have contacted me to say that this is going on.
Yeah.
A teacher friend of mine said that an outside speaker came in, took all of the black pupils out of the class to tell them all how oppressed they were.
Yeah.
And of course, they weren't happy about this either. I mean, this is the kind of anecdote that you're hearing a lot of.
We are getting many more stories from parents and teachers like this. We've got, you know, there's one school in leafy Muswell Hill. You know, it's not downtown Bronx or LA. They've brought in a third-party provider, a group called Arise, I believe. And, you know, in part of the process of the school going on its actively anti-racist journey, they're now getting all the classes to sign active anti-racist pledges.
OK.
They are also, this is a very interesting thing, they're also funding just black children to go to extra classes as well.
So when they say anti-racist, because, you know, I would consider myself anti-racist because I'm opposed to racism, I'm sure you would consider yourself anti-racist.
Yes.
That's not what they mean, though, is it?
No, it isn't. I mean, active, you know, this new, if you like, the modern anti-racism is rooted in critical social justice theory, and it locks people into their race. Now, as an individual, you can, you know, you can have memories and relate to your race or your sex or gender as individually. But the key thing is you're a person, and then you can decide whether it's going to be important or not important, or whether you know, whether you're going to retrospect your whole life through the prism of race, or whether you're just going to say, yeah, that was a bit of a bummer time, but we move on.
Yes.
It denies that freedom. It's very hostile to freedom. It's very hostile to tolerance. It's very ungenerous. It goes for zero tolerance rather than tolerance. And it doesn't believe in impartiality. It believes impartiality is a power play. And frankly, that is really disastrous for education, because if you don't believe in truth and you don't believe in the possibility of objectivity, then you have political activism.
So if you're telling kids that, you know, if they're white, they're always going to be privileged, they're always going to be complicit in white supremacy, whether they like it or not, if you're telling children from ethnic minority backgrounds that they're always going to be oppressed, it's not good for the future, is it?
Well, it's not good for the future, and it's not good now, because what it's telling us that our schools are being run by teachers who, a minority of whom actively support this, and the majority of whom are feeling increasingly uncomfortable but like everyone else in society, finding it difficult to speak out. You know, when you have a teacher, like a primary school teacher in East London, who's been working for 20 years with her colleagues, black, white, yellow, all kinds of races, and they get a third party in, and this third party activist educator starts reading from Rennie Edo Lodge's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People. Imagine you're a black boy, imagine all the hopes and dreams you have, imagine the hopes of your parents, and then you come to school and they're dashed. You know, you will never get anywhere because of systemic racism. She just felt gutted. She felt for the first time in her life, she felt like a white teacher working with black colleagues. And in a very subtle way, the collegiality, the solidarity of teachers working together was undermined.
But a lot of this probably comes from good intentions, doesn't it?
Some of it does. I think you have to differentiate. I think a lot of people, people adopting it in schools are probably doing it from good intentions because they're busy. There are so many problems, prior problems in education anyway. You know, people have not been... They're not accustomed to thinking about questions of knowledge and morality and the purpose of school. It's all been very technocratic and get the results, get the results, get the results. So that's the background. So I think they are probably doing it out of, well, you know, we've got to do something. But they're not stopping to think. Why should they? Why should a head in London in 2020 think that an event in Los Angeles, the murder of George Floyd, means that they have to review everything in their school?
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because schools, you know, at least over the past decade or so, have been pretty good at tackling racism. I used to work in a school. When there was the hint of it, we tackled it. We didn't tolerate racism. So it's not as though these have been hotbeds of white supremacy.
Well, exactly, and that shows in the attitudinal surveys that, you know, we've got attitudinal surveys from about 2020. So they'll be with adults who will have been at school the previous 10, 20 years. And, you know, they show Britain is on the whole very relaxed about race and ethnic minorities. We don't, you know, everyone does it, but yeah, there's Rishi, you know, and now there's Yusuf.
Hamza Yusuf as well in Scotland.
Hamza Yusuf, yeah, and, you know, might have lots of things to say about him, but it's not about his race, right?
Right, yeah.
Politics.
But you're not denying that racism still exists?
No, I think there will be pockets of racism and prejudice. But I think the really important point in the Commission of Racial Disparities report that came out, Tony Sewell's report, was that to say that something is institutionally racist needs a high bar of evidence, right? Because you're making a very serious accusation about an institution, and I think. And there's going to be a problem for the activists who are committed to this because they don't really believe in evidence.
Yes.
They believe in lived experience as
and
testimony.
And a feeling, a kind of sense.
A feeling, which isn't really enough to make a general claim, you see.
Yes.
And then, you know, you sort of think, well, there may well be systemic problems, like in the Casey report shows clearly it's more than a few bad apples. But before we leap to racism being the problem, well, let's look at the leadership. Let's look at what they've been doing and not doing. We've seen what the police are up to or not up to, just in who they protect, who they don't protect, and all the rest of it. There are systemic problems, but I suspect that those problems are much more to do with the problems of leadership, the problems of creating collegial cultures, those kinds of more moral problems that really do need to be discussed, but they're not necessarily racism.
And you've done a lot of freedom of information requests from Don't Divide Us to find out the extent of this. This is quite widespread, this ideology in schools. Yeah. So what would you like to see happen next? I mean, you've got a petition going, haven't you?
We have a petition and we're in the process of the second report. It's very important that somebody with power takes charge of this. Now, people will say, like they did with the sex education review that Rishi Sunak announced a week ago or so, oh, this isn't happening, or this is only happening in a few schools. And that really spectacularly misses the point, because what we have here, we've got the Russell Group universities in Britain. That's the top tier of universities, and they influence what happens in education. 50% of them have got some kind of black-only schemes, running black-only schemes. So they're endorsing this idea of positive discrimination / positive action. Positive discrimination is illegal, positive action is permissible under certain circumstances. We've got exam boards decolonising their specifications. I don't know if you were an English teacher, Andy.
I was.
Well, Kazuo Ishiguro, Alan Bennett and Mark Haddon have been taken off the selected reading list.
Really?
Kazuo Ishiguro, Never Let Me Go, one of the most fantastic novels you could introduce to teenagers about existential questions about life. But no, it's been replaced by an author, a female author of colour. It may be a good book, but that's not what the AQA is saying. They're quite open. They're doing it to tick the diversity boxes. So you've got the exam boards, you've got the professional associations, you've got the local councils, and then internally within schools, schools are creating roles for equity, diversity and inclusion positions or committees. And they, in some places, they are kind of like, really ruling the roost within the school. Other staff, they're the kind of morality police within the schools.
So it's definitely a problem. Where can people go to support your petition? How can they do that?
Please do come and have a read of it, sign it, share it and support our work if you can. You go to don'tdivideus.com.
And what's great about the resources on your website is it puts paid to this idea that it's not happening because you've gathered together so many testimonies and reports and the like. So, yes, don'tdivideus.com. That's where people can go.
Yeah.
Great. Alkasega Cuthbert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And coming up on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the YouTuber who was harassed at a protest outside the Lesbian Project gathering last week, and the police stood by and did nothing to help. See you in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. YouTuber The Laughing Auditor was harassed at the protest outside the Lesbian Project gathering last week. Well, the police apparently stood by. Him and his family have since been threatened. Let's take a look at part of what happened.
So carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Please move on. Please move. You know what I mean? Just because I'm filming. Wow. And they call me a fascist. This is what they do. And they're trying to get people on side as well.
Where are you planning to go, sir?
Pardon?
Where are you planning to go?
None of your business.
Just a general question.
Yeah, I understand, but it's none of your business.
You don't want to talk to me?
No, I'm talking to you, but I'm telling you, it's none of your business.
Planning to film for the rest of the event?
Pretty much, yeah. No, I am. The thing is, I've got no argument with these people. I just decided to film, and they're acting like this, and they're calling me a fascist.
No, you have every right to film.
I know.
And
they're impeding.
You get to just clear the footpath. It's a public footpath.
Now, because of threats his family has received, he didn't want to appear live in the studio. However, I'm thrilled to say that YouTuber The Laughing Auditor joins me now over the phone. Hello, Auditor. Can you hear me?
Hi, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Perhaps before we begin, could you just explain to people what it is you do? What are you auditing?
Yeah, so I'm a group of YouTubers that sort of go out and look at public services, things like police station, job centres, and we like to sort of look at how our tax money's being spent. And then we also sort of look at the sort of interactions we have with those sort of public officials. And yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell what sort of auditors do on YouTube.
And you're often filming the police in public events and making sure that they're not overstepping their mark. Now, in this case, you turned up. Had you gone there specifically to see this protest against the Lesbian Project?
No, I just happened to come across it. I was in the sort of Bloomsbury area of London, and I seen some police lights going off, heard a bit of music, and decided to sort of take a walk up and see what was happening. Asked a police officer, he said it was a street party, so I thought, all right, cool, I'll get my camera out and start recording. And then sort of what unfolded, you can sort of see in the video.
Yeah, it's astonishing. It's like the activists surrounded you and you weren't hostile to them, but they started calling you a fascist and pushing into you. What possible justification would they have for this?
Oh, I've no idea. As I say, I didn't know much about the sort of trans movement and sort of what they were there protesting about sort of before I went into that situation. I thought it was very sort of hypocritical how they were sort of stopping me from walking down the street and trying to stop recording, but yet seemed to want to call me a fascist for whatever reason. But yeah, I have no idea sort of why it sort of turned the way it did. And as I said, I didn't really know. I was very naive getting into that situation.
And that's very interesting, isn't it? Because this is not an area that you've known a lot about, the conflict between feminists who are concerned about their single-sex spaces and their rights, and trans activists. In this case, they'd specifically been protesting against the Lesbian Project, because that's an activist group that wants to deal specifically with lesbian issues. And they're saying that this is trans exclusionary. From what you've seen, is this an area that you might be interested in covering in the future, or are you just going to steer well clear?
No, I think it's something that I am definitely going to be looking at a bit more in the future. I've sort of learned a lot since this incident. So I woke up on Sunday morning and it was like I landed in an alternate reality. And I've sort of learned a lot since then. And I'm certainly sort of going to get across to some of the Let Women Speak events, just to sort of see how they're policed and see how these protesters react during these sort of interactions, just to see if it's an ongoing. If so, I'm going to try and document it.
Yes, well, it's very important, I think, that we do see these things documented. We've actually got a second clip of something else that happened to you during this. Let's have a look at this one.
Yeah. Excuse me, let me get past, please. Let me walk down the... You look at what you're doing. I told you I've got no fight with you guys whatsoever. I'm just walking down the road doing a bit of filming. You know, and these are doing this.
So at that point, when they punched the phone out of your hand, did you at all feel that you were in a precarious position here? Did you feel threatened?
Yeah, no, it was very surreal. As I say, I hadn't experienced anything like that before, Andrew, and like there was a large police presence, so to speak, and I didn't to escalate to that sort of severity. But at the same time, I was surrounded. They were barging into me, pushing into me, shouting at me from every direction. So for most people, they would sort of see that as a very intimidating situation. I was just thought it was just very surreal. I just couldn't understand why it had happened and why it was sort of going that way.
I mean, there were a couple of moments where you tried to have a conversation with certain people there. It does strike me that at a lot of these events, conversation is just something that's not on their mind. You know, a lot of these activists don't believe in debate and discussion. Is that the sense that you got from them?
Yeah, so I spoke to two individuals that I believe were sort of part of the organisers of that protest, and they asked me my opinion on the sort of trans movement, and my opinion was that it's your own life, live it as you want to live it. I did highlight one issue that was sort of that I had with them, and that was the sort of freedom of speech element, and that I felt that they shouldn't be forcing other people to call them by a gender if they didn't feel comfortable calling them that. And that seemed to be the sort of turning point. And yeah, it just seemed to sort of go downhill from there.
And you've had threats since this. It does feel like there's a certain, at least a contingent within the movement that are very hostile or who will jump to violence first. Do you think that the police were doing enough at this particular event?
No. I spend quite a lot of time sort of documenting the police and their activities. A lot of criminality going on at that event. There was drug taking, there was public order offences. I'd been assaulted, apart from being punched and having the phone punched from my hand. I'd been assaulted several times. I had people bashing into me, hitting me with their signs, and the police were in close proximity to it. They were seeing everything that I was seeing, and they'd done nothing whatsoever. And when I did ask them for assistance, they seemed almost too scared to intervene and to do anything. And that's what probably surprised me the most.
Now, you know the law very well because, of course, you find yourselves in these positions with police in the public square quite a lot. Surely people even shouting fascist at you, that would be some kind of violation, let alone when they start actually making physical contact with you.
Yeah, being called a fascist, it was just so ridiculous. It doesn't even bear sort of talking about. But having people using the loudhailers to use bad language to verbally abuse me, have people sort of barging into me, and then when I make sort of one move to try and sort of move a sign out my way, the police then seem to want to jump on me. So I just couldn't understand it, and yeah, the police really took me by surprise.
And now that it's happened, do you feel any regrets about going there? Would it have been better if you hadn't have gone there in the first place, do you think?
No, I don't regret it. Obviously, I've had threats to myself and to my family, which obviously isn't nice. But I'm glad I caught it. I'm glad I got to see what this group was sort of doing, and I'm glad I got to sort of highlight sort of how the police were dealing with it. Because in my opinion, it's something that the general public need to be aware of, because that could have been anybody. I was just a random guy walking down. I happened to see what I thought was a party in the street, decided to record it. And that could have been anyone, and anybody could have been sort of surrounded by that large group of sort of violent people, and it may have sort of went a different direction, and somebody could have got sort of seriously hurt.
Well, I think it's terribly important that people are filming these things and that we see the footage. We've had the Let Women Speak event in New Zealand, of course, where media outlets are trying to deny there was any violence. So we require the filming to tell us exactly what went on. Can you finally just tell us where people can find your videos and how they can support you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. So if you just check for The Laughing Auditor, and my YouTube channel is The Laughing Auditor as well. I'm pretty sure I'll pop up pretty quickly, and you can sort of see the video on there. I think it's titled "Trans Protest Out of Control," something like that. So yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on YouTube. So I'm sure if they check that, they'll find me.
Well, The Laughing Auditor, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. And it's a long video that you can watch on his YouTube channel. It's about 40 minutes long, but it is worth watching, specifically because you can see someone who has no particular opinions about the event when it starts, but by the end of the video, he's completely transformed in his worldview. It's what they call peaking in real time. It really is worth watching if you get the chance to look at it. That's the Laughing Auditor. So that is it for the first hour of Free Speech Nation, but there is still plenty more to come, including a tribute to the great Paul O'Grady, a debate on the SNP's new leader, Humza Yousaf, and plenty more topical questions from our wonderful audience. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, including a tribute to Paul O'Grady, more questions from the audience, and this week's social sensations. But let's get a news update first from Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, let's get you up to date with the headlines from the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary has blamed political correctness for the failure to tackle grooming gangs. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, Suella Braverman says authorities have turned a blind eye over fears of being labelled racist or bigoted, and she singled out British Pakistani men for particular concern. She's pledged to put people working with children in England under a new legal duty to report signs or suspicions of sexual abuse. Safeguarding Minister Sarah Dines says it's the scourge of our society.
Can't stop in making sure that people are protected. Children are the most vulnerable part of our society, as well as the elderly. We must make sure that they're not sexually abused. So I don't accept we're going to be rife with false reports. There may be 1 or 2, and they will be dealt with and identified. The overwhelming people that gave evidence are speaking the truth to the inquiry, and it was very heartbreaking testimony. We need to act.
The Port of Dover says it's working to clear the significant backlog of coaches that are trying to cross the English Channel as soon as possible. Passengers, though, are still facing long delays, some of them up to 8 hours. It's understood all coaches have finally reached the port, but holidaymakers hoping to get away for Easter do face a few more hours of waiting to have their passports checked. Officials in the port have blamed delays on a lengthy immigration process, but Suella Braverman has rejected suggestions that Brexit's responsible. The families of two British men being detained in Afghanistan say they're being treated fairly, having spoken to them in what they've described as an unscripted, emotional call. A spokesman for two of the men being held, that's Kevin Cornwell and a second unnamed man, says it represents tremendous progress. They've been in custody since January. It's unclear, though, how long the third man, the so-called danger tourist Miles Routledge, has been held. The government says it's in negotiations regarding their safety. At least one person's been killed and 16 others injured in an explosion at a cafe in Russia's second city, St. Petersburg. The prominent pro-Russian military blogger Vladimir Tatarsky is confirmed to have died. He was a vocal supporter of Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, a local news website has reported the cafe targeted was once owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Russia's Wagner Group, a notorious private army of mercenaries fighting in Ukraine. No one has yet claimed responsibility. And the Pope has led a Palm Sunday service in Rome a day after being released from hospital with bronchitis. Around 30,000 people came to watch Pope Francis opening the Easter celebrations, marking the start of Holy Week. The Pope was taken to hospital on Wednesday, complaining of breathing difficulties, but he returned home after making a swift recovery. He returned yesterday. TV online, DAB plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Free Speech Nation.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's kick off this section of the show with more questions from our beautiful studio audience. First question from William. Where is William? Hi. Hello.
Hi, Andrew. Should The Guardian be paying reparations?
Should The Guardian be paying reparations? OK, so The Guardian has apologised for its links to the slave trade and has announced that it's going to pay £10 million as part of what they call restorative justice. It's going to be carried out over the next decade. Now, I've often wondered about this. I used to do a stand-up bit about this because The Guardian was constantly cheering on people tearing down statues if there was any link to the slave trade whatsoever. But of course, The Guardian was founded by cotton merchant John Edward Taylor, who made most of his money out of slavery. And it's worse than that, actually. The Guardian supported the South in the Civil War. The Guardian attacked Abraham Lincoln for abolition. So The Guardian should be, I suppose, destroyed.
So you're saying we should defund The Guardian?
Certainly, we need to decolonise it.
We need to
destroy every evil copy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, of course I don't believe that, but you know, it does feel a bit condign, doesn't it?
I mean, look. The fabulous thing with this entire movement is the people who try too hard or institutions that try too hard, they've always got a dodgy past. Of course you're going to be really, really, really woke if, you know, in the past you weren't very nice to black people.
Yeah, well, no, that's a really important... I remember seeing someone talk about this online. Can't remember who it is, unfortunately, but they made the point that being a nasty bigot used to be the way that you could bully people.
Yeah.
And, of course, now being what we call woke is the way that you bully people. So it's not really surprising that former bigots have joined the woke bandwagon.
But was it really slavery if they had the pronouns in the bio?
Well, there we go. There we go.
This is why we can't have satire anymore. There's nothing left. You can't tell what's written and what's real.
Are you a fan of The Guardian?
I'm not. I mean, I'm aware of its work.
Yes. But the thing about it is, you know, I've caught The Guardian so often in outright misrepresentations, you know, when it ideologically suits them to do so. The Wee Spa incident, you remember, they tried their best to say that was a hoax, where a sex offender flashed a child in a spa, and because it was a trans individual, The Guardian tried to pretend it wasn't real, and that feminists were making it up. Now, that sort of thing, you just sort of think, look, this isn't journalism. This is just, you know, pushing your own ideology. Exactly. So when it comes to this, though, in a sense, we shouldn't demand that they are decolonised, should we? Because that's just we're then as bad as them, aren't we?
Yes, we should be the bigger people, but it is very funny. I mean, it's fantastic. I don't know how this stuff works. I mean, if you're mixed race, what do? Give yourself a check? I just find it...
With reparations?
Yes, I don't know. I just find it bizarre. I can't separate, who gets what and what's it based on.
Well, it's impossible to quantify.
It's so nuanced.
It's going to be very difficult, isn't it? I mean, unless you have been personally the victim of some injustice that we can then quantify that and work out how much you've lost. How does this work with reparations? Because
I'm glad you came to me with that question.
Well, no, but
with my look and my voice, I am just the man to answer it.
Well, let me tell you that. I mean, I find it interesting because we are all, presumably, well, we must be all the descendants of a combination of people who've been enslaved and of people who've done this slaving.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
Right? So my family would have been massacred in Drogheda by the rest of them. So do I get something for that? I mean, it didn't happen to me.
No one cares about the Irish.
No, OK. But, I mean, how do you quantify this?
Well,
or do you just not attempt?
It's impossible to quantify. If you know about San Francisco, they're very much talking about getting... I think it's every black citizen of San Francisco getting something like $5 million.
What?
Yes. So, and they've been openly talking about this.
Are there only 3 black citizens there? Is that,
well, that's what they were hoping, but it turns out there's more than that.
There's more.
It's not
In fact,
work.
if I was black, I'd be like, honey, we're booking ourselves a trip to San Francisco.
I mean, that's going to end up being very expensive.
Yeah, can you imagine if you are an immigrant, let's say from Ghana, you arrived there 20 years ago, you're like, yep, where are my reparations, please?
Are they going to get something? No?
Why not? That's racism if they don't.
OK, well, let's see what happens. Goodness me. Our next question is from Anita. Where is Anita? Hiya. Hello.
Hi. Evening. Really controversial.
Go on.
Do you think the sitcom Friends is offensive?
Yeah, so this debate comes up again and again about Friends being offensive. Every now and then you get an article like in The Eye or something talking about how young people hate Friends, but they don't, of course. It was one of the biggest streaming things in Netflix in recent years. But this time it's Jennifer Aniston, who, of course, was in Friends, and she says younger viewers may find some of the content offensive. Do they really?
No,
I don't think they do.
Finds Friends offensive. And listen, if you're offended by the sight of Courtney Cox in a fat suit, lose some weight.
Well, that is...
Just lose some weight.
That is...
Go to the gym. Eat well. Have a salad. Stop moaning.
Well, that is one of the most controversial elements of Friends, when she's in when they do flashbacks from when Monica was younger and she's really fat.
When you say really fat, I mean, by today's standards, she's just a bit chubby. But,
OK.
take your point.
Yeah. But I don't find that offensive. I was a very fat child, and it just brings back good memories for me,
Does it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. If that's your worst problem, I mean, it says something, doesn't it, about society? And Jennifer Aniston, who obviously I think is fabulous because she is, that's just a fact. She's apologised.
Has she apologised?
Yes, but she's done this kind of
For what? For being next to someone in a fat suit?
Some of it, she thinks they should have been more sensitive and thought it through. And I just think, no, Jennifer, no, don't apologise.
Well, I think it's partly because Chandler's dad is played by Kathleen Turner, and I think there was some sort of suggestion that was transphobic. Sometimes the relationship between Chandler and Joey, people say that's homophobic because there's a bit of kind of discomfort with their... Well, am I getting this wrong? Well, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's a comedy show.
Yeah,
right?
Who watched Friends ever and was offended by it? I don't think there is a single person actually who was. I think the whole thing is nonsense. And if people are offended by it, kill yourself.
Right. I'll just say I do not endorse any form of self-harm. Thank you for that, Francis. OK, so our next question is from Sarah. Where's Sarah?
Here. Well, it's kind of connected to that because should actors only then play versions of themselves?
So, and again, this is a debate that comes up again and again, but it's happened this week because of Guy Pearce. And you remember Guy Pearce, of course, famous for Neighbours and other things, but Neighbours is the main one. And he has apologised. He's done that thing that Cressida said you shouldn't do.
I read his apology.
Because he said that non-trans actors should be able to play trans characters. And this was a tweet that he put out. And then he got piled on by activists, and then he deleted the tweet and apologised. It's the mistake they always make. Don't apologise. It's like sharks in the water.
But it was a fantastic document. It's because he's apologised and then he's quoted his own tweet that he said he's deleted. So that's fantastic. I mean, it reads like a drunk, broken-hearted lover writing to their ex and saying, "Please have me back." But also, I do repeat all the complaints I had in the first place. It's glorious.
Well, he's got a point, doesn't he? I mean, I believe he's a heterosexual man, isn't he?
He's an actor, Andrew.
No, but I'm saying.
You're right. He calls himself somebody with a full card of privilege.
Yes, that's right. But he played a gay man in What was it?
It was Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So,
Yes.
But he was actually straight. He's one of those, isn't
Yes, and he spent 30 years regretting it.
Really?
Well, he didn't quite say it like that, but he's very aware of this
I bet
now.
his bank account didn't
well,
regret it.
Yeah.
Reparations, I don't know.
Well, look, Rock Hudson all those years played a straight man. He was
did.
as gay as the hills.
He was, absolutely. My mother, when she found out he was gay, was furious.
Really?
Absolutely betrayed.
She felt cheated, yeah?
She did. My mother's from Venezuela, and in her own words, she was like, I have never felt more disgusted.
Really? Because he was very attractive, and she had a chance. She was in with a chance with him.
Yeah, she was in. She could have been his beard.
She could have been very much his beard. Have you seen Sea Devils? He's very attractive in that. Very handsome.
He was a very handsome man, very
handsome.
Charming.
But we have to be able to play different types of You know, I'm not saying it's like, you couldn't play a sort of 20-stone woman. That would be weird. But you could play a gay man in a film. You could play a trans individual. You know, you could do all sorts of things.
Yes, absolutely.
If you could act.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you just want to do it.
I think I'd be great at playing Sue Perkins, Andrew.
Oh, really?
I reckon I could nail that part.
Why not?
Why not?
It's called acting.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
People have played different species, even. You know, that you can play an animal.
Have they?
Yeah, have you seen Shrek?
Right,
Eddie Murphy plays a donkey.
That's
He's not
true.
an actual donkey.
That's true. Well, and this is the problem. In his apology, he kind of reverted to that point. So he was apologising and defending at the same time, so we know what he really thinks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's insane. Anyway, final question for this section. This one comes from Alan. Alan, hello.
Hello. Should we ban ChatGPT?
Well, I think we should, because I hate the idea of ChatGPT. This is of this AI thing that effectively writes essays for kids and all sorts of things. But apparently you can have conversations with it, and it learns. Eventually, of course, it will learn how to kill us. Let's be clear about that. I mean, we know where this is going. But Italy has banned it. So this is really interesting, because the company that runs it, OpenAI, and they developed the chatbot, they've been ordered to stop operating in the country. So the Italians, I think, have got this one right, because they've seen Terminator 2. They know where it goes. I'm not wrong, am I? Am I fear-mongering?
No.
Am I a Luddite?
God bless the Italians' fascist little souls.
Yeah,
Occasionally they're correct. Because I'm such a narcissist, I actually went on ChatGPT yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I did. I said, write for me a typical Francis Foster joke, and it started with the setup, why did the leftists cross the road?
OK, so
it's got me.
It knows you quite well. But was the punchline any good?
Well, was the punch? No, it was too wordy and not offensive, so it didn't
work.
get me right.
So this is interesting as well, because when people ask it to write jokes, and I've seen these things being circulated online, so someone tried to ask it to write a joke about Kamala Harris. In the style, I think, of Norm Macdonald, and it came back saying, we can't do this because Kamala Harris is from an oppressed minority, and we have to have social responsibility. And then it asked them to write a joke about Donald Trump, and straight away did it, you know? Now, if the robots that are running the world are woke, we are all in a lot of trouble, aren't we? Because they are authoritarians, and they've created authoritarian robots. I mean, it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse. But if you ban things, they don't tend to pop up in good places, do they? So
That's
I don't know.
true.
I don't know what the answer to this is, but I'm fearful of
Is there a way
anything.
to destroy them? And not ban them, just destroy everything. Like, destroy all computers.
Destroy all... Well, I would like to go back to 1989. I reckon that's the best, you know, get rid of the internet. If you could have a choice, would you do that?
What,
maybe
back to
the
1989?
90s. I don't know, but before...
I'd like to go back to 90 so you get Technotronic and that
Right,
kind of
OK,
that
that'll
movement.
do. Yes, I'll take that.
I mean, but maybe I'm just not adapting to changing norms. You know, people like my friend Martin says that you have to accept this. This is the future now. All art, all books will be written by computer.
Oh, no,
everything will be generated. I mean, but isn't art about the soul of the human being ultimately?
Of course it is. Of course it is. And the idea that AI can produce art is, I think, a fallacy. Because as you said yourself a couple of weeks ago, art is an expression of the human soul. However, I did then find out that ChatGPT will take all people in advertising's job. So swings and roundabouts.
Oh yeah, maybe they'll replace politicians.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? OK, well, still to come on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be talking about how facts and reality are simply tools to be twisted in the hands of certain culture warriors. Make sure you stay tuned.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently. No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
To Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. For a certain kind of activist, reality is just another tool, something that can be manipulated at will to promote a particular agenda. Such people live in a world of individual truths and what they call different ways of knowing. In other words, facts that are unhelpful to the cause must be jettisoned or twisted into a more convenient shape. On last week's show, I presented numerous examples of footage from the protests at the Let Women Speak event in New Zealand, where trans activists attempted to intimidate a small group of women into silence through mob pressure and outright violence. And now we have this from a New Zealand media outlet calling itself Media Watch, in which the violence that we all saw is outright denied. Instead, we have a focus in this article on the joy and the singing and the dancing of the protesters. Let's have a look. Oh, well, maybe they're just terrible choreographers. Because this footage looks an awful lot like an angry mob pushing and shoving to get access to one woman who, if it weren't for the bravery of her stewards, would almost certainly have been violently attacked, which is exactly what happened to the elderly woman who was repeatedly punched in the face by protesters after they tore a barrier apart and burst through. Footage we can't show here because it's too violent, but it has been circulating online for anyone who cares to see it. Now, it's one thing for the media to lie to us. That's always occurred in one form or another. But this is something different. This is the media lying to us in spite of the truth that we can all see before our eyes. In other words, it's a demand for us to ignore reality. And that's even more sinister than lying. And although citations from George Orwell's 1984 have become something of a cliche, it is impossible in such circumstances not to think of this particular quotation. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. But Orwell wasn't some kind of prophet. He simply had a firm grasp of the nature of authoritarianism and its enduring appeal. There's nothing new about this. Remember that Orwell was a man who volunteered to fight fascists in the Spanish Civil War, so he understood the need to resist totalitarian ideas. At that time, Orwell felt that a true history of the war could never be written because accurate figures, objective accounts of what was happening simply did not exist. Here's what he wrote. Even if Franco is overthrown, what kind of records will the future historian have to go upon? And if Franco or anyone at all resembling him remains in power, the history of the war will consist largely of facts, which millions of people now living know to be lies. Well, today's circumstances are very different, of course. We're not at war, but even in a culture war, some of the same tactics apply. Activists who now dominate in all major public institutions, corporations, and in many sections of the media routinely tell us one thing when we can all see with our own eyes that the opposite is true. We all remember the coverage of protests in Kenosha on CNN, which described them as mostly peaceful in spite of the backdrop of burning cars and buildings. We all remember the BBC being rightly mocked for a description of largely peaceful protests in London, even though 27 police officers were injured, which is reminiscent, of course, of Chemical Ali, the Iraqi information minister, who claimed that the Western infidels were on the verge of defeat and slaughter, just as the US tanks were rolling into Baghdad. Because when authoritarians are in charge, there are always two versions of reality. That's why major media outlets are continually claiming that women's rights campaigners are far right, hard right, extreme right, or even fascists. And yet here's what the Communist Party of Britain posted on its website this week. The Communist Party rejects gender self-ID as the basis for sex-based entitlements in law to women's single-sex rights, spaces and facilities. We call for sex as a protected characteristic under the 2010 Equality Act to be defined as biological sex. Well, I guess communists are far right now. Welcome to the world of topsy-turvydom. And the examples are endless. So major medical journals are now saying things like sex is a spectrum, like this one from Nature magazine. Or this from the New England Journal of Medicine, which argues that sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility. And this happens all the time now. We're expected to unsee all the things that we can so plainly see. We are told that activists who beat up women are progressive, even though they're obviously regressive. We see people mobbed and threatened and vilified online by campaigners who've got "be kind" or "love wins" in their bios. We're told that woke just means being nice, being compassionate, even though those who describe themselves as such are some of the most vicious bullies around. We see people calling for social justice while acting in the most unjust ways imaginable. We see people calling themselves left-wing, while at the same time demonising working-class people and prioritising the needs of plummy-voiced activists who've never worked a day in their lives. We see schools promoting racial inclusivity by segregating children according to skin colour. We see self-declared anti-racists creating the conditions within which racism can thrive. We see Labour MPs inadvertently calling for a form of gay conversion therapy through the medicalisation of gender non-conforming children and calling it a ban on conversion therapy. In other words, culture warriors are fighting a battle with the truth. If they can promote ideas that aren't real, we are all expected to play along. And those who stick to facts and reality, who are willing to say out loud that there are two sexes, for instance, are demonised as hateful. But to speak unfashionable truths is not hate, it's heresy. And that's the thing that fundamentalists fear the most. We've got plenty more to come on Free Speech Nation. I'm about to be joined... Oh, but I want to chat to my panel first before we do that. Francis, any thoughts about this? Because one thing that has struck me recently is, as I say, lies in the media, that's fine. I'm used to that. We've had it since the media begun. Politicians lying to us, OK. But this kind of thing of just saying, look, that thing you see over there isn't real, and when I say something else is happening, you have to just accept it, it's kind of reminiscent of the Soviet Union, isn't it?
And yes, absolutely it is. And the problem is what that has created in our society is this huge schism between people who will follow this ideology and people who don't. And what inevitably happens when there's a schism is that people go further and further away from each other. So what has happened, it has created a real divide. And societies that are really divided are not cohesive. And that means society as a whole doesn't work. So it's incredibly worrying.
Well, they call this, Cressida, a legitimation crisis, when figures of authority, including the media, are caught in lies all the time, and they're caught in lies because they want to promote a certain worldview, and whether that is from the right or the left, it doesn't really matter. And what it means is that you can't... I mean, I get into the habit now, if I read a story, I check it on 3 or 4 sources first, because I know that each source is going to be lying or misrepresenting in some way. It's pretty exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything you read, you just read it and think, well, I don't know, and you're left not... There's nothing to sort of put your feet on firmly.
Yeah.
And that's what really upsets me about taking away art, because human expression, you know, anger, love, all that stuff, I feel like, well, that's at least solid ground, isn't it? Once you start messing about with that...
Yeah, but but if you're clipping out certain scenes in films or chapters of books or rewriting Roald Dahl or Agatha Christie, and, you know, all of this stuff is happening... And we've actually got a clip here. This is from the journalist Joan Smith, who was... This clip has gone viral this week because she was talking about an article she wrote for the Financial Times. Can we have a look at this one?
And I wrote a sentence which started, murders of trans women are rare in the UK, whereas women are murdered at a rate of between 2 and 3 a week. And I thought it was all fine. They said it was fine. And then I was in a bar in Rome, a very noisy bar, and I got called at 7 o'clock in the evening. And I was told by the literary editor at the FT that a group of people at the paper wanted to add a sentence saying murders in the UK of trans women are rare but disproportionately high to the number of trans people in the country. And I said, but this is not true. And he said, no, but people here feel very uncomfortable with not saying that.
So, this journalist, Joan Smith, was asked by her editor at the FT to put in something that they all accepted wasn't true, was a lie, because activists would prefer it to be true. Now, that should be shocking, right?
Well, it should be shocking, but it's not shocking. I mean, one thing that is shocking about it is that you think the FT would be slightly more insulated from this nonsense.
It's not. It's been very captured. The FT has been very captured. I only recently found that out, but it has been.
Because it deals with finance and numbers, and you would expect that people who read the FT don't really care about these issues as much because they're more interested in the markets, etc., etc. But it just shows that all media is captured, and the reality is if all media is captured, can you believe any of it?
It's great that she refused to capitulate and to write something false in her article because it's in her name. You know, if someone said to me here, you know, you've got to say this open lie on air, I would refuse to do it. How could you do that and call yourself a journalist, you know?
Well, I think journalist is quite a loose term, isn't it, in this day and age? I mean, I don't think most journalists would have a problem doing that.
Really? You think?
Because we're seeing, aren't we, more and more, we're seeing, as you've just said, you can go to 4 or 5 news sources and still come away thinking, no, I'm not sure about that.
I mean, I saw it the other day with the Irish Times. There was an article about J.K. Rowling, and the writer for the Irish Times had said that she is against equal treatment of trans people. That's factually incorrect. It's just factually wrong. So, and I would be worried about that. But, you know, I think we should all be worried. Because
we should all be worried about it because the media is where we get our information from. But it's got to the point now, like I've said before, where we no longer trust the media, and that puts us in a very difficult situation because, as well, there's going to be people on the other side of it who are going to promote their lies. And they're going to say, hey, you know what? They've been lying to you, which, of course, they have. You can trust me.
And it also means it's the boy that cries wolf. When they start telling the truth, people aren't going to believe it. Anyway, plenty more to come tonight on Free Speech Nation. I'm about to be joined by Vanity Von Glow to discuss the career of the late, great Paul O'Grady.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, the bonkers new law which will allow employees to sue their bosses if someone offends them at work. Well, this insane policy offends me deeply. In my take at 10, the move to a cashless society is a direct assault on people power. I'm not having it. Cash is king. My Mark Meets guest is legendary journalist Polly Toynbee, plus Anne Widdecombe on our biggest trade deal since Brexit. And my political pundits and tomorrow's papers. We're live from 9 to 11 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. There was some very sad news this week when it was announced that the brilliant presenter and comedian Paul O'Grady had died at the age of 67. O'Grady created the wonderful drag queen character Lily Savage, went on to become a hugely popular TV and radio host, winning numerous awards for The Paul O'Grady Show. He was made an MBE for services to entertainment in 2008. Let's watch him in action.
He used to call me sweetheart all the time. Oh, sweetheart. Do you know why? Because he couldn't remember my friggin' name, that's why. I remember when I met him and we were getting engaged. We were looking in Pike's, the jewellers in Liverpool, in the window, and I said, that's a lovely ring there. He said, I'll get you that when the shop shuts.
And here to pay tribute to Paul, I'm delighted to welcome Vanity Von Glow. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I think Paul O'Grady, I think Lily Savage was probably my first encounter with the drag as an art form on TV as a child. And really pioneering stuff.
Well, yeah, but I think the thing that strikes me is that Paul O'Grady is so many people's first introduction to drag because it was so mainstreamed. But we actually have quite a rich drag tradition in the UK. Yes. And so there were, you know, little nods to drag and the absurd camp comedy throughout television before that. Yes. But yeah, I mean, even myself, I remember hearing this strange voice on the TV. I think it was Parkinson. Lily Savage was on Parkinson. And the same thing happened to me a few years maybe it was like a year later, I heard this strange voice on Parkinson. I had to come downstairs. Who is that? And it was Dame Edna. So I knew then I was obsessed. And you know, but Paul O'Grady had such a great, like, vinegary sense of humour, which I think of as being really British. Yes. I don't know how many of you would have seen an American drag show, but American drag is very camp, but the camp almost relies on quite a cheeky, I think I sometimes say, a slightly infantile sense of humour. Yes. There's a childish optimism to it, which is very charming. But here, the British drag is... Oh, yeah. You know, sucking on a cigarette, really dry, and that's humour that we all love.
I mean, I remember as a kid being shocked, actually, by some of the things Lily Savage was saying, because... and the drag shows I've seen in, you know, drag, as you say, can be really waspish, acerbic, sometimes really shocking and offensive, really, you know, and he would do the same, you know, particularly in the live performances.
There's a great thing that I think great comics do, but definitely that Lily Savage would do, which would say something that's package something that's quite on the nose and quite offensive, but it would take you a minute. You would have the laugh, and then you'd go, that was actually really bad, but we'd already moved on.
Yeah.
And so by then it's like, well, you've missed your moment to put your hand up and complain.
Yes.
And there's a fearlessness that's required to do that, which is one of the things that Paul O'Grady had spades of, you know.
Yeah.
I think it probably comes from that, you know, to be a fearless comic, well, to be a fearless comic, you either have to be a total dickhead. But I think in Paul O'Grady's case, it was actually enormously compassionate.
Yes.
He had a real warmth. Lily had a warmth underneath all of the, you know, pantomime of it.
I think that's a really interesting point because, yes, Lily Savage would say these waspish, cutting things, but you warm to her.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, think about how long. I mean, I think Lily Savage was doing like morning television appearances in the early 90s, and then right up until recent years, Paul O'Grady was on TV. So to sustain 30 years as a comic in that level of scrutiny and with that many people watching, you have to be warm. People have to like you if they're going to like you for 30 years.
Absolutely. And do you think seeing that kind of figure on TV had a kind of positive effect on other artists, other creatives?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. I'd say that there's probably not many people that do my job that haven't been influenced by Lily Savage in some way, in the same way that, you know, I'm obsessed with Dame Edna, Barry Humphries. And, you know, just when you see something you like, in the same way that with my music, the shows that I do are live music shows, you know, I have been told I have the voice of a British Celine Dion. You just emulate the things that you like. There's a, you know, I wouldn't say you imitate it, but we're magpies creatives, so we take just little inflections, and that's what makes watching, you know, artists so interesting, because when you can really, especially musicians, you can then really see their influences and hear where they've come from.
And there's something very interesting about drag, or the creation of a persona, and that distance between who the person is authentically beneath all of that and what they create.
Yeah.
I think we saw that with Paul O'Grady very much when he got his own show.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's people who hadn't even seen him without makeup.
Yeah, absolutely. And people didn't, you know Paul O'Grady's name. Janet Street Porter said she went to a dinner party, some fancy thing. No, she didn't tell me this. I watched her.
I thought that was a good name drop
she was sat next to this person, and on the name tag said Paul O'Grady, and she went, "Who on earth is that?" And then he came and he sat down and went, "I'm Lily Savage," and she had no idea, you know. and she was familiar with Lily Savage, but his identity was concealed, which I actually think is kind of the right thing for drag. I mean, nowadays we have shows that show how the sausage is made, like RuPaul's Drag Race, that people want to watch, you know.
Yes.
Watch that. I find that tedious. I think that's quite a boring fixation on how the thing is put together. I'm like, watch the show. The show's the art, not the sitting in the mirror talking shit with your friend.
Yeah. Well, is the point, I suppose... oh, sorry, I just have to apologise for the bad language there. Vanity. What are you thinking? Is the point... Is it kind of like... a ventriloquist dummy, insofar as you can get away with a whole lot more.
You're saying Paul O'Grady had someone's hand up his...
No, I wasn't suggesting that. But you know what I mean? Like, because I've seen you perform as well, and some of the, you know, the way that you get away with stuff, I think, when you're in the persona, that maybe Paul O'Grady wouldn't have got away with if he wasn't Lily.
Oh,
do you know
totally.
what I mean?
100%. I mean, you know, it's not just that. I mean, when you're putting on a persona, you're also taking on different status.
Yes.
You know, I think this is one of the things. Some people that are worried that drag is sort of anti-feminist in some way, they miss this, that actually drag puts on the armour of almost the sort of divinely feminine. You know, Camille Paglia used to say that her favourite feminism was drag queen feminism, because the drag queens understood the visual power of fabulous, you know, imagery.
Yes.
So yeah, if you're going to bedeck yourselves like Cleopatra, then you're actually going to get just a little bit more leeway from people, I think.
And even leaving aside the drag, Paul O'Grady was just a great writer, just a great comedic writer. It's really hard, and his timing was just fantastic.
Yeah, he had a sort of I'm from Glasgow, and he has a slight Billy Connolly-esque thing, which you couldn't extract his identity from where he's from. You know, it's so local, and so, you know, endless stories of characters from his own life that have made him who he was. So
yeah, you couldn't imagine anyone else doing those jokes.
No.
No. Well, Vanity Manglo, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. And And do check out Vanity Bungalow on Twitter. You've got a show coming up, haven't you? Power Ballads?
Yes, I never tweet anything because I have nothing to say. But you can, my show Drag Queen Power Ballads. It's a sort of budget rock concert, and it's in London. You can get tickets on the internet. Type in Drag Queen Power Ballads. It is what it says on the tin.
It's a great thing to do. Much cheaper than the ABBA Voyage thing, I would.
It is, much cheaper.
Yeah. Right. Well, coming up on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be asking if the new SNP leader Humza Yousaf can secure independence for Scotland, and we'll be taking a look at this week's social sensations. See you in a few minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
As we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. I'd just like to reiterate our apologies if anyone was offended by the bad language in the previous segment of the show. And coming right up on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be asking if the new SNP leader Humza Yousaf can secure independence for Scotland. We're also going to be looking at this week's social sensations. So there's a lot to go through in this final section of the show. So on to Scottish politics now. So this week, Humza Yousaf was confirmed as Scotland's new First Minister, replacing Nicola Sturgeon. The 37-year-old Health Secretary becomes the first Muslim leader of a major UK political party and was seen as the continuity candidate. But can he achieve the SNP's ultimate goal, which is, of course, independence for Scotland? So here to discuss the task facing Scotland's new leader, I'm joined by former SNP councillor Austin Sheridan and former MSP for the Conservatives and then Reform UK, Michelle Ballantyne. Thank you both ever so much for joining me tonight. Michelle, I'm going to come to you first. Do you feel that Humza Yousaf has what it takes to secure the ultimate goal for the SNP, which is, of course, independence for Scotland?
In a word, no.
He presented himself as the continuity candidate, and I think continuity is exactly what we saw at the first FMQs. It was dull, it was uninspiring, and what's worse, he just went straight to the Sturgeon playbook of everything is everybody else's fault, it's all the UK government's fault, and hey-ho, I'll throw in a misleading statistic and we'll say that Scotland had more GDP growth than it in the UK, and of course that's factually incorrect. So what we're getting is just more of the same, and actually Nicola Sturgeon gave us the answer. She went to court, the court said that the Holyrood doesn't have the right to actually put in an independence vote campaign and a vote, and therefore the answer is no, and he can't do anything about it. He's just going to give his buddies lots of money to talk about it, and that'll be that.
Austin Sheridan, is that an insurmountable obstacle insofar as Westminster has already said that they would have to give approval to any kind of independence vote?
Well, Hamza Yusuf he can deliver independence, but not just him alone. It does require a wider effort from other independence parties and indeed the Yes movement overall. I believe that the way that we achieve independence is by moving the dial in support. I believe that although Nicola Sturgeon in her valiant efforts to deliver a referendum was admirable, she did do the right thing in trying to do that. I believe that the opinion polls, where they kind of go between yes goes in the lead and no goes in the lead, I believe that if we can move the dial in support for independence, make it consistent, as in maybe say 55, 60%, then those obstacles that Westminster present to Scotland holding the referendum would then dissolve, because then we would be able to make a stronger case that they are arguing against the will of the Scottish people. And I just don't believe that Westminster would be able to sustain that kind of resistance.
Now, Austin Sheridan, you are right to say that the polls are suggesting that SNP, of course, is still very popular in Scotland. But Alex Salmond recently said that under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership, the vote for the independence, or at least the polling for independence, did drop way below that 50% mark that they require. Do you think that Nicola Sturgeon failed or drew the cause of Scottish independence, well, I suppose, backpedalled on that view?
Well, at one point, when Nicola Sturgeon was First Minister, independence in an opinion poll reached 58%, which is the highest we had ever seen in support for independence. That's what I'm discussing. We're talking about the fluctuation in the opinion polls. I think it's important to note, though, that independence doesn't hinge on one person, doesn't hinge on Nicola Sturgeon, doesn't hinge on Hamza Yusuf, it doesn't hinge on Alex Salmond. It actually hinges on every single person who believes in independence, for them to get out there, for them to campaign, to convince our fellow citizens that independence is the best way forward. If we do that in an effective manner, and we can move the dial in support for independence to, say, 55-60% consistently in opinion polls, then I would say that the resistance that Westminster shows to Scottish democracy would then start to dissolve, because it would become completely untenable.
Michelle Ballantyne, is it not the case that the SNP are, so powerful in Scotland that it's effectively, it's been described as a kind of one-party state? Other parties can't get close to it because of this independence issue, even when, as we saw with the reform to the Gender Recognition Bill, they were putting something through that even their own voters didn't approve of. Is it not the case that the SNP are just here to stay?
They're probably not ever going to disappear. They've been around for a long time. But the point is, and what Austin is saying quite clear, is they've got to move the dial. And the reality is they can't move the dial far enough, because they can't govern Scotland well enough to convince anybody that previously voted no and still supports no in a strong way and wants the UK to stay together. They can't convince us that actually they're competent enough, or that Scotland actually would be well off enough to sustain the lifestyle that people are basically used to, because at the moment it is heavily subsidised by the UK as a whole. And I think it is that inability to govern Scotland well that means that they will never get past the position where the majority of Scotland say, actually, you know what, I think we could make a go of it as an independent country. Because the reality is they're so fixated on separating the UK that they've got a whole load of people in government who neither have the experience or the talent or the qualities needed to actually provide a real growth economy, to actually make the trains run well and on time, to provide a justice system that people feel safe and they recognise who are the victims and who aren't the victims. And I think this is a great problem with the Scottish Government as a whole, that they don't do the right thing. They're not using their devolved powers to make Scotland a better place. It's all talk, it's all fluff.
Well, we've got two very opposing viewpoints there. I do appreciate you both coming on to discuss it. Austin Sheridan and Michelle Ballantyne, thank you very much. So it's now time for Social Sensations. This is the part of the show we devote to the hits and misses from the world of social media. So first up, we played tribute to Paul O'Grady earlier, and we're certainly not ones to have misremembered the comedian this week, but Dominic Raab had a bit of a tricky one. Let's have a look at this.
Yeah, I thank the honourable gentleman. I totally agree with him. And Paul Grayson was an incredible comic, but he also... but Paul O'Grady...
I actually feel a bit sorry for him there. I mean, it can happen to anyone, can't it? And Larry Grayson was a great
Larry Grayson was a great comic.
Yeah.
Quite different from Paul O'Grady, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, that could happen to anyone. That could...
Totally.
You know,
yeah.
I've made mistakes with names before.
Yes, and he laughed it off.
He laughed it off.
I guess he did quite well. I mean, whether there'll be any bullying later on...
probably will.
Being corrected, I don't know, but...
OK, well... I want to take his frustrations out on a civil servant.
Allegedly. Allegedly. OK, next up, this video's gone viral as well. This is actor Kathy Burke, and this is to do with the definition of woke. What does she have to say?
You woke if you call out bad things, basically. If you're not racist, you're woke. If you're not homophobic, oh, you're woke. Be woke, kids, be woke.
And this just, I think, shows, like, I'm sure she completely means well and thinks that that's what it means. And everyone's got totally different definitions of this term. I mean, I would say that if you're woke, you're authoritarian and contributing to a racist climate. So it's the opposite of what she thinks. And we're both on the same side insofar as we're both against racism. So it's difficult.
It is difficult. The word woke originally comes from a 1938 song by Leadbelly, which was the famous blues artist, which was talking actually about the killings of 4 black men who were put to death because they were wrongly convicted for rape.
The Scottsboro Boys,
yeah. And he was actually saying stay woke, which is be aware of racial injustice, which we can all agree on. But where it's got to now is where if you say the wrong word or have the wrong opinion, will completely destroy you, even if it's mistakes that happened in the past. I don't think that's what Kathy Burke means.
No, it's not what she means, and that's the point, is that what you'll find is that woke, people who describe themselves as woke, people who use the word woke as a pejorative, people who say that being woke is just being kind, broadly speaking, they're all against racism. They think you should be alert to social injustice. So how do we resolve this? It's a language problem.
Well, it is a language problem, but if you're Kathy Burke, you kind of... Like, come on, check first, you know. It just strikes me that's not very self-aware. And I say that as someone who loves Kathy Burke. And
no, she's brilliant.
It breaks my heart that...
OK, well, look, we don't have much time, so I do want to see if we can get one of your unfiltered dilemmas in, which we try to do at the end of the show. This one came in from Alexandra in Yorkshire. She says, friends in a WhatsApp group are getting very excited about some sort of upcoming trip or holiday. Only problem is, I've not been invited. Do I hope it's an oversight and raise the issue, or keep quiet and possibly miss out? That is awkward, isn't it? When you're in a WhatsApp group and everyone's saying, oh, you know, we're off to, you know, Tenerife next week. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. Maybe they should have got her out of the WhatsApp group before they did, or created a new one.
I think so.
Without her. Is that what you
groups
do?
No, I mean, I think she should bury her emotions, take it to the grave. Don't embarrass yourself. But no, that's what people do, isn't it? They do breakaway groups. You text your mate and go, "Hey, Francis, don't tell Andrew." But
I hope you're not doing that.
We're going to go to a very exclusive Italian island, then come back and complain that he's tired.
I can't believe you're annoyed that I didn't invite you.
Yes, I'm very annoyed.
No, it's just I know you've got expensive tastes and I wouldn't be able to keep up. That's
what, in Capri?
Also, I invited you to Sark. We went to Sark.
Yeah, it's not Capri, is it, mate?
It's just as good.
So what should she do?
We don't know what you... Just get over it.
Yeah.
That's my advice. Anyway, I think we've solved that problem. Thank you all so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week, of course, when activists harassed a YouTuber to prove they are on the right side of history. Hamza Yusuf became the new leader of the SNP, and a grand jury decided to indict Donald Trump. Thanks so much to my lovely panel, Cressida Wetton and Francis Foster, and to all of my guests this evening. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio for Free Speech Nation and be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com and stay tuned for Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. And Headliners at 11 o'clock. Francis is going to be there for that. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office.
Dry over the next few days as high pressure builds in. We will see plenty of sunny spells by day, but chilly at night. And then rain later moving in by the middle of the week. This area of high pressure anchored to the east of us, keeping weather fronts at bay generally over the next few days. But they will try and move in as we head towards Wednesday in particular, bringing some wetter and windier weather across the north and the west. Chilly evening out there. We've got clear skies across much of the UK, just some thicker cloud around northern and western areas. This will generally keep the frost at bay here, but elsewhere under the clear skies tonight we'll see temperatures falling close to, if not below freezing, -2 to -4 in the prone spots of northern England and southern Scotland. But that means plenty of blue skies to start the day on Monday morning. A chilly start. You might need to scrape the ice off the car, but that will soon melt away as the sun gets to work, and then through the day on Monday, a fine day to come. Plenty of sunny spells. Sunshine a bit more hazy though and limited across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, but temperatures doing quite well, 14 or 15 Celsius in the north and the west, but still chilly along some eastern coasts with the breeze coming off the North Sea here. Temperatures falling away again Monday evening under those clear skies. The cloud just thickening across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland further as this weather system starts to move in, giving a few splashes of rain. But just notice the blues returning back on the map, indicating a frost returning to take us into Tuesday morning. That means, again, a sunny start across much of England and Wales. Cloudy skies across Northern Ireland, far west of Scotland to begin Tuesday with some patchy rain and drizzle here. This continues through the day, but elsewhere, plenty of sunny spells. So again, the sunshine just turning hazy further east across parts of Scotland, northern England into the afternoon. And temperatures not too bad in that sunshine. That wetter weather moving in for Wednesday and Thursday, but temperatures overall a little above average.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.